Bankers, lenders of Reddit. What is the most bizarre loan you have seen people apply for? I was a mortgage loan officer in the refi boom after 9/11. I was doing mainly 130k or so refi or cash out loans. A VP for an investment bank called in off our direct mail piece. 900k house. Wanted a lower rate on a 30-year note. Made about 750k a year. Pull his credit. Almost $500,000 in credit card debt. He claimed to be borrowing money at near 0% and investing it in short-term CDs for about a 1% spread just for the fun of it. Couldn't qualify with the loans. Wouldn't pay them off and stopped playing the game. And the house didn't appraise high enough to roll closing costs in. Nice guy. I believe he was spending the money obviously on something else and it was long gone. He couldn't admit this to guys at work, so he called us. I worked it for months. Had a new idea and he emailed me and said he got it done elsewhere and to not contact him anymore. You can make $750,000 a year, but if you spend $750,001, you're in the red. It's sad when that level of comfort can't be appreciated and is blown with poor spending habits. I work in tech, specifically in the mortgage industry. The funniest thing I saw was a closing disclosure, the document you get before your loan that covers all your payoffs among other things, for someone who was paying off a ton of debt from a variety of sources by refinancing their home. They had a section K, which is basically third-party payoffs, that was literally longer than our document form could handle. Normally this section can handle 10-11 payoffs, and it's rare for us to see more than 2 or 3. This person had close to 40, which is just insane. It took our tech team 3 days to get a new template that would work, get it approved, and fix the software so it could be handled. I would imagine that's partially because your underwriter must have had balls of steel to approve a loan for someone who has 40 loans with balances. We used to offer a home equity line of credit with the marketing along the lines of it's like turning your house into a savings account. It even came with a Visa card. Had a monthly adjustable variable rate tied to the prime rate. People applied for it like mad, and that is the most bizarre loan I have ever seen people apply for. I'm pretty confident they all lost their houses in the housing implosion a few years later. Home equity is a useful tool, but you know people were going on vacations and buying groceries with that freaking Visa card. I worked at a bank in the Twin Cities before the housing market crashed and we frequently opened up Helix with a $150 K open line of credit. House may be worth $250 K. Left before the crash occurred, but I hope the bank got torched on those credit lines. Such an irresponsible loan to push in the first place. I am not a banker, but a customer who received loan offers. I find it bizarre that people take loans to go on vacation, unless one of the travelers is dying or will never be able to travel in the future. Borrowing money to go on vacation baffles me. Yeah, it's a trap. Outside a couple cases like I've saved $6,000 at a rate of 800/no. Dream trip will cost $9,000 if I take it during this holiday period but won't be possible again in the future. Otherwise it would be a trap. Not me, but my dad worked for Citi Financial way back. He told me how this guy took out a loan to buy a ring for his girlfriend of several months, bought her car, and to give her what was left over to help her out with her kids. That same guy came back a week later to cancel it because she took off with the car, money, and ring and ditched him and her kids. Not a banker or lender. However, my college roommate last year was always spending insane amounts of money on stuff. 1 week a new TV and PS4, the next a car, and the next some other overly priced and needed thing. It was insane. I asked him where'd he get all his money. He said it was from his loans. I assumed maybe it was a bit extra that he got in a school refund when you overpay your school bill with your loans, grants, scholarships, etc. Albeit a bit more than I would expect. Nope. Literally took out loan to buy this stuff. I had to explain to him that you have to pay it back. It's not just free money. That was a real punch in the balls for him. In 2007, my buddy who had been a bartender was hired by a regular at his bar to become a mortgage underwriter. One of his first customers was a guy who made $1,800 per month applying for a loan that had a monthly payment of $3,600 per month to start. But it was an ARM, and it was slated to increase to $5,400 per month after 3 years. And this loan was to buy a boat, not a house. The guy who hired my buddy came in and told my buddy to underwrite the loan. And that's the story of how my buddy quit his new job before his first shift even ended. Was hired by a regular at his bar to become a mortgage underwriter. The bubble in 2007 was so big that even bars had mortgage underwriters. Seriously though, so that guy would default on the loan in the first month. I want £10,000 but I'll pay it back in a week. You see, some guys are currently driving round London in an armoured truck full of my gold and I have to pay them £10k for bringing it to me. My long lost uncle built up a fortune in Africa and recently passed. This is my inheritance. When asked if he had ever met his African relatives, the answer was no. When asked if he'd ever heard of them before they rang to tell him about this truck full of gold, the answer was no. So apparently the courier had loaded the truck and sent it on its way before they had even contacted him to tell him about it, and they were aimlessly driving round and round London waiting on their fee. Didn't matter how many times I told him he was being scammed, he didn't believe me. He was 19 with less than £100 in his account and no job. Needless to say, we did not approve the loan. B called me a B and said he'd have my job. I stayed there another 4 years before I left to have a baby, so clearly didn't manage to make much of that threat. I once had a client apply for a loan for pea supplies. I was the unfortunate one who had to tell him that we would not be giving him the $150,000 loan. When confronted about how a deadbeat guy was a pill popper and degenerate gambler was going to make good on interest, he said he was about to win the lawsuit of a lifetime. Who was he suing? Little League. Why? Because he got hit with a foul ball and he was hurt. When his two most valuable assets were a Ford Ranger with 100,000 miles and a 15-year-old big screen TV, he was told to pound sand. My husband works in a bank and he says it's ridiculous how much people borrow for their weddings. I don't get it. Why do you need a lavish ceremony when you obviously can't afford it? I know they do it to impress others, but still. I'm in the back office for reporting bad loans to our stakeholders. We acquired a bank that gave a farmer $5 mil and only had his cows as collateral. He stopped paying the loan. We went to go pick up the cows and they were mysteriously gone. Board of directors weren't happy, but very obvious why the bank we bought was going under. Insane collateral stories from junk banks we've bought in the past. Just because they lend doesn't mean they're good for it. Not a banker, but was friends with one in high school. He told me there was this pee-off old lady who wanted to borrow $1 million to buy out her doctor's office and bulldoze it because she told her she was overweight. If there's anyone at all who can be excused for telling you you're overweight, it's your doctor. Lady doesn't need a loan for a bulldozer. She needs one for her therapist. We had an application from somebody once who wanted to borrow from us so he could pay administrators to help him file bankruptcy. He didn't think we would see through his clever plan there to screw us out of money. We also often have people apply for loans for debt consolidation of a single debt when they have quite a few other debts which are in arrears. When we query the single debt, it's the only one with a guarantor. So effectively they want us to lend them money to remove the security on that one debt so that they can then treat us like the rest of their creditors, or apply for an insolvency action to try and help them reset their credit. I had a client who once came in for a personal loan. They were looking for about $20k to pay off and close multiple credit cards and use the rest for a vacation. After it was approved and the funds advanced to their account, they used the money, and surprise, it wasn't for the credit cards. The client came back 2 months later looking for another loan and was surprised when I let them know that they were being declined because they failed to meet the conditions previously set. Pay and close off 2 credit cards. The client was furious that they were not approved and called everyone in my branch a scammer for not loaning her more money. I am a loan officer, so this is literally my thing. 1. Guy applied for a plane just to go back and forth to Costa Rica. Dude had the cash for it. We couldn't finance though since we don't do that kind of collateral. 2. Applying for like a 5th or 6th car. Somewhat common to find parents, normally elderly ones with several cars on their credit cards they co-sign for the whole family. For your information, this skyrockets your debt ratio since you are still liable for the loan. 3. One guy wanted to buy an 18-wheeler that was converted into an RV. Thought that was neat. 4. 30k plus motorcycles usually blow me away since it is essentially a toy. 5. To get a loan to pay their other loans they are behind with us. 6. Sad ones are when we catch children committing elderly abuse by making their elderly parent buy them cars. Unfortunately had to call the elderly abuse hotline more than once. Probably more, but those are off the top of my head. A home equity loan is normally used for house improvements. The clients have to go through a vetting process, appraisal, after a certain amount. We have had countless clients try to apply because they were rebuilding their house and ran out of money. Straight up, the appraiser told us that the house was framework. TLDR, get a HELOC before you start any work on your house, just in case. Also, I feel like bankers get a bad rap for being salesmen. I personally just want to help my clients create a better, easier life for themselves, as do many others. Most will tell the client if they're getting the raw deal of an elephant's dong, as noted in the comment above. You aren't wrong. The banker that we got a mortgage through did his level best to make the process as painless as possible. It wasn't easy, but he could have made it harder. Wherever you are, mortgage guy, I owe you a cake. Baked in the kitchen I will outright own in 20 years. I had turned down someone for a small business loan last year, which was completely legitimate. It was for a zipline pulley system to transport snacks from the kitchen to your desk or the reception area. Many years ago I had an elderly couple call in. They had plenty of money in savings already. They wanted to borrow £25k, our upper limit at the time. They wanted it for a once-in-a-lifetime holiday. Fair enough. They could afford the repayments with their pensions etc, all good. They then proceeded to ask for loan insurance. This was before the PPI scandal here in the UK. I explained the extra cost and the pros and cons. They were adamant they wanted it, and then explained that Mr. had cancer and had been given 12 months to live. They had done their research and knew our policy on loan protection would pay out when he died, ultimately meaning they would get the loan paid off. I spoke to my line manager to check, and the loan was agreed and processed. I was sad for them, but also I was amazed at how calm the couple were about it all. A bank I used to work for had a lot of niche loan products that it had slowly phased out, one of which was a tugboat loan. Yes, a loan to finance the purchase of a tugboat. One day, almost 7 years into the job, someone approached me and asked if we still did tugboat loans. I was a bit surprised but told him that technically yes, we still did. The interest rate was 8%. He asked what documents he would need to provide, so I sent an email to the lending department's general inbox asking what would be required. What preceded was a hilarious 2 weeks of emails asking if I was serious, and underwriters genuinely having to go back through company archives and look up documents from the 1990s. Apparently the last time they did a tugboat loan was 1993. We eventually found the policy in an old FTP drive that was otherwise used to hold paper applications no longer in use. The guy had to apply on paper. Apparently you needed a marina permit, the operating agreement for your hauling company, a commercial boating license, the bill of sale for the tug, and some tax returns. There was a lot of pushback from lending to try to get him to buy the tugboat through a home equity loan, but I pointed out that Reg B, loan regulation, forbade me from refusing a loan application, and his home didn't have the equity necessary for the boat. Direct financing was really the only option that made sense. Even after closing the loan, there was loads of confusion as every loan account type had a different numeric scheme and nobody seemed to know what the numbering scheme was for a tugboat loan. In the end the loan number was something really weird like 100,000,001. The bank phased out the loan project almost immediately after closing. Like, the day afterwards a mass email went out saying that no future tugboat loans could be done. At this point, pretty much everybody knew that this had to do with my loan and thought it was hysterical. It was a pretty small company, so word traveled fast. Our senior underwriter gave me a captain's hat at the annual Christmas party. I used to process subprime loans back in the late 90s. Had a borrower one time who was doing a debt consolidation loan with the equity they had in their house and was getting cash out. The underwriter asked for a letter of explanation. Basically, what are you planning to do with all this money? Around $15,000, I think. Borrower wrote back that they planned to buy a new yellow Ford Ranger XLT and attached a PO from their dealer. The loan rate was north of 10% for 30 years, and they got their cash out refee. I work at a bank. Not a loan scenario, but funny as heck. This African dude wearing a dashiki comes into the branch and sits with a female co-worker of mine. Super loud talker. His conversational tone was borderline yelling. He tells my co-worker that he wants to file a fraud claim, so she connects him with the fraud department over the phone at her desk. This guy's fraud claim was he got her H yesterday and owed her $100 but he didn't have cash handy and was too lazy to hit the ATM. His solution was to give her his debit card and PIN and have her go to the ATM. Surprisingly, she never came back and withdrew $300 instead of the agreed upon $100. He wanted to file a claim for the $200 difference. Guy came into the bank bragging about how many properties he owned, how much he made, nice house, etc. Dude also had a bunch of cats. Applied for a $250k loan to buy an island in the Caribbean for the cats to live freely on and himself to retire. Was mad when he got denied. I would get mad too, to have your dreams destroyed like that by a lowly bank clerk. Think of the cats. Not a banker, but I set up auto loans for customers when I worked at a dealership, and I had one lady who seemed fairly normal and cogent get nearly all the way through the process when she informed me as that God was arranging for how she would pay for the car. That's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. When you find out how God is going to do that, we can finish up the last of the paperwork on this application. Blessings. Overheard on my first week in the job. No, I'm sorry, so we can't consider a business loan for a jet ski. Because you operate a haulage business, that's why. I used to work at a bank assessing claims for hardship. One customer accumulated $15k credit card debt playing Farmville. This was about 8 years ago. Another, who had just turned 18 and gotten a credit card, accumulated $5k debt in 1 month with purchases from Games Warehouse and Domino's. Another middle-aged gentleman maxed out 2x $75k credit cards, $150k total, on an internet dating service. His transaction history showed that it was spent on webcam girls. I had a guy refinance a mortgage with me. He needed to free up some cash flow because he had started a distillery. He had run up his credit cards and worked a full-time gig on top of running the distillery, which had just become profitable after 5 years. He was married, both of their second marriages, so their finances were fairly split. He had roughly a $500k home with only about $100k left to pay over 7 years 15-year mortgage. And his new wife was adamant that she did not want to go back in term. They had about $100k in additional credit card debts, car loans they were paying off, and she had just retired. Part of the reason they were looking to refi now. Now this is one of those situations where she wanted the husband to deal with everything and never wanted to talk with me. Until the husband got so fed up with being the middleman he just handed her the phone and left the house. Or so she told me. Once I explained I could save them literally $5k a month, of which she could invest half back into the mortgage and actually pay the home off faster than their current plan, she was all about it. But the fact that she was so against it even when I heard him repeat everything I said to her, then for him to just walk out of the house so she could either hang up on me or actually listen, was weird. As a side note, after closing the loan I bought a bottle of whiskey from their online shop. I can understand why they were only barely profitable. Former mortgage loan officer here. Borrower wanted to refinance his house and pull out $50k to pay off his mistress. Fell through when he realized his wife is also on the title and would have to sign off on it too. I had a man apply for an auto loan, and when I pulled his credit, I asked where the Ford on his credit was. He promptly told me he dropped it off at the Ford dealership across the road and let them repo it about 5 minutes ago and now wants something else. He even pointed it out through the window. Figured he could get a second loan before the bank see he repoed it. There was another weird fella, young man, who wanted to buy some more ninja crap that cost about $500. He applied for a credit card and surprisingly he was approved, but it only had about $300 starting credit. He said it wasn't enough and then closed it. He came back a week later to try for a different card. I told him it would be impossible since he just opened and closed a credit card and it would make his credit worse. He insisted on doing it, so I did. Twice in a span of 2 weeks. Rejected both times. The last time I saw him I told him I wouldn't do it and he would have to find another bank since it was a waste of time for me and it kept ruining his credit score. We desperately need a financial education class in high school. Romance scams. Romance scams everywhere. Don't wire money or take out a loan to pay for your fiancé that you've never even met in person. I had a customer ask for a $25K loan which he wanted to then invest with the bank in our managed funds, so that he could then use the profits as a house deposit. He could not seem to understand that because the interest rate on the loan was, like, 10% PA. More than the interest earned on the managed funds, he would be losing money. Mortgage loan officer here. Someone who wanted to finance everything, so including notary fees and the file cost of the credit. He had €300 on his account and it was only the 15th of the month. File cost equals €500. It's not that weird of a question. I mean, I've had worse. But he kept on insisting I should give him the money and that I'm unreasonable to ask for €500 his file cost. I should just drop them. That way, the credit could be approved according to him. He was sure another bank would approve and he would change banks with everything he had. He's still a customer of ours after 2 years. Guess it didn't work out. Dumbest question I've had. Can you put me through with Steve from Bank Z? Keeping in mind I work for Bank X. I say to the customer she has to phone that bank then. Her reply, you work at a bank, right? So, just put me through with Steve who also rocks for a bank. There's many more stories, but this post would just become too long. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.